every day or 4 or 5 days of the week, even if you could get it, is brilliant. But it needs to become a higher priority for those that have good numbers of cows calved and they're calving since the end of January, because the cows will be starting to go into more of a negative energy balance now. That's really important, and and every day that passes, it's going to become more important.
Grazing should be beginning on most farms, or should have started on most farms at this stage, with lots of cows calved currently around the country. However, the weather has turned poor of late and may have discouraged people from getting out to grass, especially considering they're busy in the yards at the moment with cows calving, etc. So I'm joined today by John McCabe. John is the Programme Advisor with the Teagasc Aurivo Joint Programme up in the west of Ireland, and is a grazing advocate. And John is going to talk to us today about tips and tricks that people can maybe employ in terms of getting out to grass and getting grass into the cow's diet as soon as possible. So John, give us an idea of what's happening out around the country.
There's a kind of a country of two halves, really. A lot of rain in parts of the south, which has forced cows into sheds, I suppose, and drier in other parts. So opening covers are reasonable now. There's a fair amount of grass on farms, but averages hide a lot. So like grass supply is a really funny thing. If you pick any day of any year ever, there'll always be farms with loads of grass, and there'll be farms that are tight. And take for example this spring, there's people that have opened with 11, 1200 of an average farm cover, which is a lot, and there's people that have opened with 600 and 700, which could be tight if depending on their stocking rate. So the advice is always going to be slightly different. There's people and there is people that are short, and there's people that have loads. I suppose in terms of grazing, there is as I said, a lot of rain down south that has forced people into sheds. And then there's people that haven't enough cows calved yet, or are only really getting going with the amount of cows they have calved and going into the tank. But so again, variable. We've people with 0% grazed, and we have people with 25% grazed. I was talking to David Gannon, who is the Aurivo focus farmer for County Galway. This morning he has 23% of the farm grazed. So you always have this range, and I suppose the point we have for everyone is to try get the grazing started if you haven't yet, and get I think that first grazing, uh, get that first grazing done, and it becomes more of a priority in your head. I suppose there has been quite amount of dry weather over the last couple of weeks, but some people didn't have cows calved during that dry weather, depending on when they start or what part of the country they're in.
Yeah, okay. So John, I suppose what's the objective here in the advice that you're giving to try to get out in February as much as possible? Tricky conditions, as you said, maybe on the horizon. The temptation is just to take the easy way, I suppose, and stay inside. But it's worth an awful lot of money. Like €4 a cow is a fair sum of money when you add it up across the national average herd of around 100. So it comes to a lot. So what's the recommendation? I suppose we've 11 days left in the month of February now. And you mentioned there 23% grazed a day over there, maybe very small levels grazed, maybe on other farms. What way are people going to handle that? Like, are we going to go for 30%? Are we going to go for 25%? Are we going to go to 35%? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, before I deal with the percentage graze piece, I think my thoughts on it are that grazing by day has to become higher on the priority, especially for farms that are calving since the end of January, mid end of January, start of February, and that have a lot of cows calved. Because what you're going to be looking at is cows are coming into milk now. They're starting to require more energy, and they're not going to be able to get what they need out of grass or out of silage, pardon me. So getting a grazing in per day. I was talking to one man in Donegal, Richard Starrett, and he put it lovely to me earlier. He said the middle of the day is very short these days,
Yeah.
between milking, calving, calves, bedding down pens, keeping cubicles done, feeding silage, keeping on top of minerals. And if there's a bit of fertiliser to be spread, or other jobs to be organised, like the middle of the day is very short, and he's right. And I suppose we're not trying to bring drudgery into it, but what we have to realize that the effect of grass every day or 4 or 5 days of the week, even if you could get it, is gets is brilliant, but it needs to become a higher priority for those that have good numbers of cows calved and they're calving since the end of January, because the cows will be starting to go into more of a negative energy balance now. That's really important, and it's because and every day that passes, it's going to become more important.
Yeah,
Um, I suppose that's one piece. So I suppose the advice is grass by day if you can. Like if you're not grazing at all, try and get out a couple of grazings. And I suppose if you want to deal with your percentages grazed and that, typically 30% grazed is the target for people calving from the 1st of February in around that. And if you're calving later or in different parts of the country, you're talking maybe 20% grazed by the end of February is a good target. But we know we've got people heading for 30 and we've people at 0. So that I think if we can just have it in our minds that we need to get grass into the cows, that's the main thing. Um, we also have to take into account what I said earlier on. We've got farms that have loads of grass and farms that are short. And if the farms that are short, there's no point in going out in the evening, I would say. Because if you're going to take 2 grazings a day, get up to 30, 40% graze, but then run out from Paddy's Day onwards when cows are really humming and at peak, what was the point in that? So we still need to get area grazed though. We need to start uh, setting up a wedge and I suppose the point of spring grazing, or the point of the spring rotation planner, or the importance of the first half of the spring rotation planner, is what I'd like to get across, is that really if you break it down, it's 3 or 4 paddocks you want to get them grazed and back growing again for the second round. So, and that's what we need to keep in our mind for the plant and for the farm, is about getting a couple of paddocks grazed, back growing again, and then we can switch our focus onto taking out heavier covers or taking out more awkward paddocks, weather depending. But for now, it's get a couple of paddocks grazed back growing again, and to the effect of getting ag grazing into the cows every day is huge in terms of the energy you're getting into the cows. So that's the priority for now. Stuart, in terms of tactics, I suppose I was talking to another farmer about the last couple of springs have been fairly frustrating in terms of spring grazing. We need to keep the faith, um, and we know that it could come wet at some stage, but it's still worth getting out, as you said, €4 per cow per day. But if we want grass into the cows every day, and especially as we get into March, and especially as we get into the middle of March. And so what I would say is don't graze all your trump cards now. So if there's what I call a trump card is a paddock that's on the drier side of your farm, or on your spectrum of paddocks, it's drier. It has roadways. It might have an L of a roadway on 2 sides or 3 sides, even plenty of gaps. They're your go-to paddocks. It's good to have them. It's good to start on easier paddocks beside the yard, but I would say just don't graze all your trump cards now. Don't use all your trump cards and then come around to the middle of March and have no have a bad hand, because if you've cows in for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, and your silage is, and even if your silage is good, you're still going to be hitting your protein. So, and your yield out into peak. So really, if we can get grazing by day, and for the farms, if you think about this, there are farms that don't do much spring grazing at all up until after Paddy's Day. If you could do grazing by day the whole way through up into April, wouldn't that be a better thing than doing no grazing at all and then going out around Paddy's Day with an average farm cover of, off the scale, you can't even read it, 14, 15. That's going to have a massive effect on a farm. So if we could get great grass by day on them farms, get grass by day on the farms that are short, that's going to ration it out, and it's going to still achieve some of the grazing objectives that we want. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, really. That would be part of the advice anyway, Stuart.
So John, I suppose I think that's good advice in terms of keeping a couple of dry paddocks, we'll say, for the real wet days, as opposed to taking them because they're straightforward, like. And the other side of it then is, I suppose, that objective of grazing. Like it's all the real reason for it is you just want to get ground grazed off in the spring to get it back growing. That's the big thing, and it comes back to your point there about not maybe starting to graze until mid to late March. Like you're going into heavier covers potentially at that stage. And that's slow to get back going as well. Like, so what can people do in the short term, maybe about ground like that, because there might be a bit of that anyway. So what kind of tactics can people employ with, we'll say, the likes of the farms that have the heavy covers there now? What should they be doing, do you think?
Well, if you go out and walk down heavy covers, you'll the first thing that'll strike you will be the color of them. So there's a fair amount of yellowy type grass, maybe dead senescence, dead grass, and they need nitrogen. The whole farm needs nitrogen if we can drive on the soil, but especially them heavy covers, and the temptation is always there. You hear it all the time, but not spreading grass onto them covers. Don't like driving on the heavy covers or something. But they need the nitrogen, and the reason they need it is to green them up, keep them from reducing in quality, but also in terms of the recovery of them. Because if they're heavy when they're getting grazed into March and into the end of March, they're to be white at the butt when they're grazed, and the regrowth will be lesser quality, number one, and slower. So it's very important, I think, that they get the nitrogen too. I think for me, if thinking back over the last number of springs, we've had like a good target for me would be to not run out of grass in April, and I think that's a good target for every farm. We all know that, but a lot of us are running out or running tight, which is affecting peak milk yield. There could be a stocking rate element to that. There is a stocking rate element to that, but also there's a grazing element to it and a tactics element. So for me, it's get a couple of paddocks grazed and back growing again. And a simple way of going about it then would be to invert the wedge, or inverting the wedge is a fancy way of saying go for the heaviest covers on the farm once you get a couple of paddocks grazed, back growing again. Then go for the heaviest paddocks on the farm. If weather permitting, obviously, you mightn't be able to do that. But the reason I say that is you get them heavy covers taken out before they reduce in quality. Work done by Brian Gary a number of years ago showed that in a lot of years after Paddy's Day, them heavy covers reduce in quality, and by the time you get out into April, they're starting to resemble more like silage than they are in terms of their energy value. Still better than silage typically, but depending on the year, they start to reduce in quality. They go a bit rank. So I'd be trying to get the aim for the next few weeks, get area grazed, and then start taking out them heavy covers. And don't go around in a circle. Some people start in paddock one, then two, three, four, up the road, down the road. Uh, Go to the heaviest and take them off. They'll benefit. You'll get extra growth if you can get them grazed off, because they'll benefit from the action of grazing. And the middle of the wedge there, them covers that are between 800,000 for 1,300, them type of covers will tend to grow well in the spring anyway, and they're top probably better quality. So they'll do you out into the second half of March and the last of the rotation. So couple of paddocks grazing back growing again, and then weather permitting, the focus has to switch to taking out them lower quality or heavier covers. Obviously, that's a great plan, and then we'll get 2 or 3 inches of rain, and our plans are scuppered. But we have to have plans all the same. If you think about the nitrogen piece as well, Stuart, it's important that everywhere gets nitrogen. We're heading for March now. And obviously, weather permitting, you shouldn't be going out with a major rainfall event coming in the next 2 days. But we do need to get the nitrogen out. Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, no, John, I suppose I was just making the point that, like you're saying about those poorer quality paddocks, like they're still super feed, so people shouldn't be afraid of them. And I think it's great advice. Like You did it. I was just about to ask you, but you went and did it anyway. Like just to kind of tell us what you mean by inverting the wedge. So get the 25-30% grazed. You can target the lower covers while you're still indoors and so forth, and then start going into the heavier covers when you have good numbers of cows calved and appetites are up as well. It'll help to knock through it. And I suppose it's a good point that you make. Like those lower covers, and those higher covers tend to kind of be a bit stagnant in terms of growth at this stage of the year, whereas the middle of the range, the kind of the 500s, nor maybe 600s, 700s plus up to maybe 12 or 1300, they tend to actually grow away nicely, even in moderate growing conditions during the springtime. So your theory is to take out those heavy ones, get them going as well in early March then, and that you're going into cover then as you're approaching the start of the second round. It's going to be very responsive to both the nitrogen that you've applied, but also as soon as the ground is grazed, if there's any reasonable level of growth there, it'll be greening up and getting going quite quickly again. And you mentioned the nitrogen then, John, I suppose, like how important that like the country, like it's a great spring so far compared to to 2024 anyway, without a doubt across the country. But we missed around the fertiliser in the spring of 24, and it seems to have hurt a lot of farms. Um, so I don't know, just what's your take on that? Maybe like that there's a kind of a conflicting message maybe potentially out there in relation to, like you said, the advice is not to spread if there's a major rainfall event coming or anything like that. We're not talking about spreading bags and bags of stuff here now. We're talking about a light sprinkle, basically, of fertilizer to get the thing going. And how important is that early application?
Oh, sure, it's critical really. And if you look back to last year, there was anywhere from between 200 kilos of dry matter lost up to well over a ton, I would say, on some farms that didn't get any fertilizer out until the last days of March. Now I know that the weather was bad and and it was right probably in a lot of cases not to go, but we need to take the opportunities. Take their points and the goals will come, but we need to start taking our opportunities. Soil temperature this morning in Galway is 8 degrees, even though it'd skin you outside, it's cold. So I suppose the air temperature or the wind chill factor is there. Maybe it feels a bit colder, but when the soil temperature was 8 degrees this morning, which is up, so we're ticking the box for that. We've Soil conditions are actually quite good in most places, apart from them place I mentioned, maybe that got 50 and 55 mil of rain over the weekend in
And they
Wexford
mightn't
and
be too
in
bad either,
Cork.
John.
They
Like
mightn't be too
they
bad.
mightn't
Yeah,
be
you'd be
too bad because a
surprised.
lot that heavy rain often runs off the ground quite quickly, which is obviously why we need to be careful with the fertilizer. But it does
Yes.
mean that you can travel quite quickly after those kind of events sometimes as well. Like,
And we do have to be careful with the fertilizer. And by being careful with the fertilizer is you respect your buffer zone, so you keep back from the water courses. Careful with the fertilizer means you don't go with a load of fertilizer just before there's going to be heavy rain within 2 or 3 days. Careful with the fertilizer means you're going with a little amount, as you say. And so the advice from us this year is around 20 units to start. So look, if that's 16 units or 18 units, that's fine. It doesn't really, the piece or the thing that matters is that we get a little bit out early. And you'll get a response over the next couple of weeks. But the real response comes in from the middle of March onwards, where you get after you graze and as you go along, you get an even greater response. Work done in Moor Park over the last couple of springs showed that putting 60 kilos out in the middle of March versus splitting that up and putting a bit out, half it in February and half it in March, they grew an extra 250 kilos of dry matter roughly. That's a bale per hectare extra growth that's coming into your second round. Or if you look at it in terms of growth, daily growth rates at the start of the second round are probably around 35 a day. So you're talking a couple of days grass or a couple of days earlier, 3, 4, 5 days more grass at the start of the second round when cows are at peak. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about getting the farm set up to grow a lot. we're talking about second rotation grass, we're talking about milk production for peak milk, and it's all linked and it's all really important. So, and I suppose if you take it back, that's the theory, or that's why if you take it back to your farm, and my man in Donegal, Richard Starrett, said the middle of the day is very short. It is very short, and trying to get fertilizer out now when you have 5, 6, 10, however many cows you have calving per day can be difficult. And maybe it's a case that contractor has to be booked, because if you're not going to get around to it, it's going to pay for itself if the contractor can get it out versus not getting it out at all, or delaying it by a few weeks. So it's critical, really, and I think we need to go. Obviously, whether you have to employ all good farming practices, but it needs to go. Just maybe as an update, the Aurivo Teagasc Aurivo Joint Programme, there are focus farmers on that. There's 5 focus farmers. All of them have around 18 units gone out across the whole platform. They're in counties Galway, Mayo, Sligo, Westmeath, Donegal. So that's where they're at. And most farmers that I have been talking to, some of them have it out, and some of them just haven't had a chance. Hasn't been either the fertilizer wasn't in the yard, or they're just very busy calving, haven't had a chance, hasn't been a high priority. This is a nudge to say that it needs to go. So if you think of these two things, the grazing piece every day and getting the fertilizer out, it takes a bit of focus. It takes putting it higher on the priority list of things you need to get done today, or things you need to get done this week. And I know farms are really busy at the minute, so maybe you need a bit of help to help you do it, or a contractor to come in and do it. And that's, I suppose, the advice is just to bring it back to your farm. How are you going to get a chance to hit these 2 or 3 key pieces of information over the next week or 10 days? And that's getting grazing in by day at least, and getting 18 or 20 units out. How are you going to do it?
Great advice, John, actually, to be fair. Like, I'd say if we'd Martina on there, she'd probably be able to rattle off numbers fairly quickly about how the efficient farmers that she comes across in the labour side of things are doing exactly what you said there. Even if they have the finest, newest spreader in the yard, they are still in getting that extra help in because they are busy in the yard.
If it is a thing that you don't want to let the contractor at the fertilizer because there might be wet spots in fields, or you're not set up or XYZ, the whole farm doesn't need to be done. I was talking to a guy in Knock County Mayo, Danny Walsh, today. He'd be on a heavier type soil. He has a bit of fertilizer and slurry out on about 40% of the platform where he could drive. That's fine. And also, if it is a case that you have wet spots in fields, there could be things you could do. You could put a bucket out, or a pigtail with a piece of plastic, or a feed bag, to say this is a wet spot, stay away. But I do think flying around the farm and doing them couple of things in advance of a contractor coming to get the fertilizer out, it's far better than no fertilizer out, going out at all, and feeding silage and high levels of meal to cows in April.
Absolutely, John. Yeah. So I suppose I will wrap it up, John, and I suppose we'll wrap it up with just a quick summary of the top 2 or 3 things that people need to get about doing if they haven't already started doing them. I suppose the first is obviously the fertilizer is probably the key piece there from what you're saying, and the other piece is to get grazing if you're not already grazing. And is there any third piece of advice that you want to share with us?
I suppose the silage piece, Stuart, is that, and we all know this, a big belly of silage can hamper grazing. If cows are going out with big full bellies of silage, they're not going to do a mighty job. And it might, if they don't do a mighty job today, it might make you be less inclined to want to put them out tomorrow. So, um, there's plenty of different ways of having cows ready for grazing without having full bellies of silage. Do whatever is palatable to you, be it stand off for an hour or two, or pull the silage back from the barrier, whatever it is. But have it in the brain that silage is going to, full bellies of silage is going to make the grazing piece difficult. So that's another piece. Yeah, and as I said, grazing, if we can get farms that are short on grass, get grazing in by day. Don't go too mad so that you run out. Farms that have a lot of grass probably need to try and get the odd evening grazing in if they could, but and definitely need to start taking off the heavier covers from the early March onwards. And I suppose, as I said, invert the wedge.
Okay, very good, John. So thanks for joining me today, and appreciate the excellent advice.
Best of luck to everyone with the busy couple of weeks ahead.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts. And for more information, you can visit the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Stuart Childs, and join us next time for your Dairy Edge.